Hey, what's going on YouTube? Wanted to do my top 25 rankings actually heading into the conference championship week 14. I got a couple other games also. I believe there's a couple in the Big 12. But go ahead and start with my 5 outside. So, start with number 5, got South Florida. So they had a pretty easy test against UCF this past weekend. Won 44-3. South Florida's actually been really good ever since they lost to Navy 29-17. I believe they've won like 4 straight or something like that. Had a nice 65-27 against Cincinnati in there as well. So they're playing really well. Could see a big bowl win coming from them, and they could be one of the top 25 teams at the end of the season. All right, so number 4 is BYU. They had a good win over a very inconsistent Utah State team. It was 51-28. Up and down year for BYU. Started the year very well. Obviously, the 2 Hail Marys, Boise State and then Nebraska. And then after that, had some tough games. They had the loss to Mizzou, which again was rough. They had 2 losses to UCLA and Michigan that kind of derailed their playoff hopes pretty early in the season. But overall, a pretty solid finish to the season for BYU. Winning 7 of their final 8 games, or 6 of their final 7. 7 of their final 8, yeah. So, only loss in there coming to Missouri. It was a very emotional night there. So, I mean, they did have a little bit of a rough stretch with San Jose State and Mizzou, but like I said, pretty solid finish to the season for them. They probably end up in a pretty good bowl game. If they win their bowl game, they will finish the year in the top 25. Pretty rough year for injuries for them, too. Tanner Mangum did finish out the season. He was a very solid quarterback. Not really sure if Taysom Hill is going to be able to get an injury redshirt and come back next year. I need to read more up on that, but should be a solid team heading into next year. So my third one is Western Kentucky. So Western Kentucky had a real solid year under the radar, finishing the regular season 10-2. They are moving into the Conference USA Championship next week, and if they win that, then I think they're inside the top 25. They did lose to LSU this season. They lost a game earlier in the year, I believe it was to Indiana. But overall, like I said, pretty solid year. They could cap it off pretty well heading into the bowl season, winning the Conference USA Championship this week against Southern Miss. They had a huge win against Marshall last week, who is definitely one of the better teams in the Conference USA. They beat Louisiana Tech this year, so obviously they are beating Conference USA's best, which, I mean, some people might not say that's that hard, but yeah, so they did lose 38-35 to Indiana also, but a team that's definitely capable of competing with a lot of Power 5 teams, and, I wouldn't, it's hard to say if they'd be able to beat teams around them, like a couple teams in the lower half of the AP Top 25 this week. LSU, USC, Navy, those sort of teams. Don't know if they would beat them, but you could definitely see them competing. All right, so my number 2 team is Wisconsin, able to win Paul Bunyan's Axe this past weekend against Minnesota. A game that actually looked very losable for Wisconsin. A lot of people have Minnesota winning that game heading into the week, so getting a 10-point win there is actually really big for them. And then the number 1 team, Tennessee. So a solid finish to the year for Tennessee. Beat a lot of solid teams to end the year. Had a lot of close losses at the beginning of the year. Finished off with I believe it was 53-28 victory against Vanderbilt. And just responded really well to some early season adversity. There's going to be a lot of hype for Tennessee going into next year again. They have Josh Dobbs back for his senior year. They got Jalen Hurd, Alvin Kamara back for another year. Defense will just continue to mature, so should be a pretty good team heading into next year. They did win 5 in a row to finish off the season, see how they do in their bowl game also. All right, so moving to the top 25. At 25, we've got Georgia. So they had a 13-7 win against Georgia Tech, and parted ways with Mark Richt today. So I'm not really sure what Georgia team we're going to be looking at going into next year. Don't really know what's going to be happening with Nick Chubb either. It's definitely going to be a new identity for Georgia, that's for sure. I have no idea who they're looking at for head coach right now. It'll be interesting to see what happens in their bowl game. So move on to number 24, USC. So USC beat UCLA over the weekend. It just kind of shows that it really shows the inconsistencies this year. The USC did have the talent, obviously, to be a top 10 team finishing the year. Beating a top 25 team like UCLA, a pretty good UCLA team this year. 40 to 21 is definitely a huge accomplishment. I believe that does lock them into the Pac-12 championship this week against Stanford, and they have a chance to knock off a Stanford team that actually might have a chance at the playoff, and kind of show the way things have gone in the Pac-12 this year that a 8-4 USC team did win the Pac-12 South. So move on to number 23, LSU, and they finished off the year about as really about as good as they could have. Had a good win against A&M last week. Not sure what's going to happen with the whole Les Miles situation. My personal opinion, I just don't believe that they're going to find anyone better. Les Miles has been a really good coach for them. Obviously, they've hit some hardships over the past 2-3 years. The year they had Zach Bentonberger, they did all right, but they just really haven't been able to find a quarterback. And partly that is on Les Miles, but you can't blame the fact that they haven't had a good quarterback in a while. Outside of Zach Mettenberger, really. Obviously, Les Miles was able to recruit him, but just on the coach. He's had a very solid career there, but they might want to move forward. They did win 19-7. Big game for Leonard Fournette again. And they should have him for one more year, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with LSU heading into next year. All right, so move on to number 22, Navy, and I won't lie, I really didn't see that whole Houston game coming. So, they did lose 52-31. Actually, it might have been 51-32. Not exactly sure what way that is, but big game for Keenan Reynolds to break the FBS career record for touchdowns, and just a tough game, real tough game for Navy. Houston's a good team. It's hard to stop a quarterback that's as good as Greg Ward, very good dual threat quarterback, but they had a good game plan for the triple option. Defense played very well. The offense obviously played well, so. You got to give Houston props where it's due, and I believe that knocks Navy out of being able to play in the conference championship this week. So I believe that's going to be Temple taking their place now. Actually, it's going to be Houston. So that was the play-in for the conference championship. So moving on to number 21, Temple, and a team that actually will be playing the AAC championship this week. Very good season for Temple. They finished 7-1 in conference play, and 2 losses this year, I believe, to Houston and it was either Houston or Memphis. Oh no, never mind. South Florida. They did lose to South Florida, and a really hot South Florida team at the time. They did lose by 4 points to Notre Dame, but really a solid season for Temple. Obviously defied expectations. They're going to be ranked in the top 25 this week, and if they can beat Houston, then that'll lock. I think that'll lock them up at top 20 finish to the year, depending on who they play in their bowl game, even if they do lose their bowl game. All right, so number 20, Utah beat Colorado this past weekend. So, for a team that had a little bit of a rough patch finishing off the year, it'll be nice for them to get to. It was nice for them to get to play a team like Colorado. Good season for Utah. Very obviously started off very well. I believe they were ranked as high as number 3 at one point, but lost to USC. I think the loss to USC really just started derailing their season, and really wasn't able to recover too much from that. Even Colorado, they did struggle with a little bit last weekend. It was a 6-point win, so Travis Wilson played very good when he could. It was a really good season for Devontae Booker, but like I said, a team that just didn't have the depth to make it to the playoff, a team that did have a very good defense this year, and a team that I think does deserve to finish in the top 25. All right, so moving on to number 19, Michigan. The big game was really uneventful. Obviously, if any of you guys watched it, they lost 42-13 to Ohio State, and just nothing really went well for them. Jake Rudock got injured at the end of the game. Davion Smith really got shut down for most of the game. It was just a rough game for Michigan. Defense, obviously, like I said, defense really didn't play up to par. Jordan Lewis was getting beat for most of the day by Michael Thomas. So, like I said, rough end to the season. They did lose to Michigan State and Ohio State. So, really a successful year for Michigan as far as everything else goes. I think they're on the right track. But yeah, like I said, see what happens next year. All right, so move on to number 18, Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a 30-27 win against Mississippi State, and I believe they either finish in second or third place. I believe that Arkansas is in second, so they should be in third place in the SEC West. Cap off a 9-win season, at least through the regular season, and obviously had some huge wins this year, including that Mississippi State win. Obviously, the Alabama win was huge. The only team able to beat Alabama this year, at least so far. So good year for Ole Miss. See what happens next year with another year having Chad Kelly, and see maybe if they can get a little bit better running game next year to support. All right, so moving on to number 17, Florida. Just team that's really kind of disappeared after the loss of Will Greer about a month ago. They were looking like a really good team, a top 10 team in the country when they had a passing game. But just having to start Treon Harris, I don't know. He's just not a good passing quarterback. He's pretty much the Florida equivalent of Brandon Harris. And, they had to rely on the running game just entirely too much. Pretty much all their flaws were shown out against Florida State, and a very good effort by Florida State. And, it might be a rough game for them against Alabama. All right, so on to number 16, Oregon. They actually had a pretty close game against Oregon State, but it is a rivalry game. Those things tend to happen. So, responded about as well as they could to having 3 early losses in the season. And, we'll see what happens in their bowl game. Vernon Adams getting healthy finally. You get to see what Oregon could actually done this year. The defense playing a little bit better, but, the defense obviously showing that they still have flaws. A huge win against USC I guess technically 2 weeks ago. And, it's hard. It's hard to say right now, If they had played the way they could have the entire season, they probably could have been Pac-12 North champions. But Stanford got that feat. They did beat Stanford this year, too, so they did have some impressive victories. Played Michigan State very close, too, so they had their opportunities, but also some bad losses, including a loss to Washington State. So we'll see what happens with Oregon in their bowl game, but they should have a lot of hype going into next year. All right, so move on to number 15, Houston. And I probably have them ranked a lot higher than most of the polls. Well, I think they're like number 18 in the AP poll, maybe number 19. But I believe that they solidly deserve to be number 15 to beat a Navy team that's been playing really well the way they did. Their only loss was, I think kind of a fluky loss to UConn. UConn's not a terrible team this year, but they're obviously not great. They're a 6-win bowl team in the AAC, so, rough for Houston to lose that game, but they head in as favorites into a Conference USA American Athletic Conference Championship game against Temple. If they can win their bowl game, then I think they can finish with a top 10 ranking with honestly what I think is one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Definitely one of the more under the radar quarterbacks with Greg Ward. All right, so move on to number 14, Oklahoma State, and to be honest, that game yesterday was just sad. I was at the game, and kind of had that feeling in the back of your mind after Oklahoma State got down 34-10, 34-10, that it was going to be a long day. I mean, obviously you had it before then, but just not Oklahoma State's day. Not able to stop anything on defense. Offense didn't keep up much either. They had to start J.W. Walsh in his final game, and the offensive scheme just wasn't very good. To be honest, it feels like Oklahoma State should be ranked lower, but just resume-wise, it's kind of hard to put them lower than they are. See what happens in the bowl game. Still believe they're a solid team that has a lot of potential going into next year. They went into the game with a broken foot with Mason Rudolph. Overall, a season that defied a lot of expectations for Oklahoma State. So, like I said, they don't lose that much this year. They do lose J.W. Walsh. They lose Emmanuel Ogba, but a team that can be pretty good next year. All right, so move on to number 13, Northwestern. So, I don't know. Northwestern was able to actually keep pace and finish off the season very well, something that they haven't been able to do in years past. Mainly, I like to use the example of 2013. I really thought it would be a mirror of 2013 for Northwestern this year. If it's starting off 4-0, but then just kind of collapsing after losing 2 in a row. But they lost 2 in a row and responded really well. Their 2 losses weren't terrible. Obviously, the Iowa loss doesn't look bad now. I mean, they did lose by a lot to Iowa. Did get shut out by Michigan, but I think that This is a Northwestern team that actually played very well this year. Very good defense, a decent running game, and did really what they had to do to finish pretty well off in the Big Ten this year. I believe they were, I want to say. The way they did finish it, I believe that leaves them as the fourth highest ranked team in the Big Ten. Big Ten conference, it was pretty deep this year. So, just good finish to the season for them. I would have the confidence to say they are the second best team in the Big Ten West. Obviously, Wisconsin was good, but they did beat Wisconsin this year, so, yeah. All right, move on to number 12, Baylor, and not an exciting game against TCU. So, hard to say what would have happened, maybe if it was in Waco or if the weather would have been clear, but it wasn't. And, losing Jarrett Stidham didn't help, but, kind of just a rough weekend for Baylor. They could have won. They would have had to rely on Oklahoma State to beat Oklahoma, which obviously wasn't going to happen, but, not a bad season for Baylor. Obviously, they were considered one of the best teams in the country at one time, but just not good luck at quarterback this year. Chris Johnson played well against Oklahoma State, and Jarrett Stidham obviously played well when he was starting, and he might be back for the bowl game. But, like I said, just an unfortunate year for the health of Baylor quarterbacks. But, it shows that Baylor's starting to get some consistency under them. They are a top 15, top 10 program year in and year out now with Art Briles, and they locked them up till I believe it was 2021. So, should be some steady success in the future for Baylor. All right, move on to number 11, TCU. It's hard to believe that TCU's ranked here at this point of the year, but they responded really well at the end of the year. Just a team, again, another team kind of ravaged by injury at the end of the year, or no, actually throughout the entire year. Like I said, not an entertaining game with Baylor, but they did win nonetheless. Played very close with OU, granted, an OU team that didn't have Baker Mayfield or Samaje Perine at the end of the game. Game probably would have been a lot different if they had them, but they didn't, and TCU did play well, almost won that game. So, if they can't win their bowl game, then it'll be a top 10 finish to what looked like a broken year for TCU, and a finish that actually won't be too bad. All right, so move on to number 10, Notre Dame. Kind of heartbreaking loss for Notre Dame against Stanford. They did lose 38-36. Very exciting game, and pretty much eliminates them from the playoff. Again, another team that was destroyed by injury this year, but still responded extremely well. Deshaun Kaiser played admirably. Obviously, C.J. Prosise and Will Fuller had huge years, and it should be a Notre Dame team that has a lot of hype going into next year, like they pretty much always do. So move on to number 9, Florida State, and after the losses to Clemson and Georgia Tech, like I said, couldn't finish the year off much better than they did against Florida. So big game for Dalvin Cook. Sean McGuire did what he had to, and it looks like Sean McGuire is the quarterback of the future, I guess, for one more year. For Florida State, he's played very well. He's only had one loss, and that was the number 1 team in the country while he's been starting. So, Florida State team that looks like they can be very good heading into next year if they can get another year out of Dalvin Cook, which I believe they do. He might be a third-year sophomore, so I think he could enter the draft, but we'll see what happens there. A team that could easily have a top 10 finish if they have a good win in their bowl game. So, good finish to the season for Florida State. All right, move on to number 8, Stanford. And a lot of people are going to say that they think Stanford should be ranked higher, but the teams above them just have a better resume than Stanford does this year. Stanford obviously has a lot of big wins, but they do have losses to Oregon and Northwestern, and that's enough to pull you down out of the top 7. And we'll see what happens against USC. They already have played them, but I think as far as the playoff goes, they're about done. They need a lot to happen. Because, you look at the playoff now, it'd probably have to be Clemson losing, Alabama losing. Even after that, Clemson loses, you probably slot North Carolina into the playoff, and then Alabama loses, and then, I don't know, you might have 2 Big Ten teams in there. Ohio State played really well, so I don't know. Like I said, tough situation to see Stanford making the playoff. But, very good win against Notre Dame nonetheless. All right, so move on to number 7, North Carolina. And, that loss against South Carolina is killing them right now. I'd say North Carolina could be the number 3 ranked team in the country right now if it wasn't for that loss to South Carolina, just because they've been beating every other team. I wouldn't say so badly, but, they do have a couple wins this year that are pretty impressive. They did beat Duke sideways. They beat NC State pretty good, a pretty good NC State team at that. An NC State team that played Clemson very closely. They did beat Pitt, beat Miami. They probably have a few other quality wins, but the thing that's hurting them also is I don't think they have a win against a team that is currently in the top 25. Now, they do have a loss to South Carolina, so the fact that they are a one-loss team that's playing extremely well keeps them alive right now, and I think they will make a huge jump this week. Obviously, still very alive in the college football playoff with the amount of teams in the top 10 that lost this week, but obviously it's basically, or at this point, it's basically up to them beating Clemson this week. Don't know if the line's out for the game yet. Yeah, Clemson by 5.5, so obviously people think that North Carolina can compete, but we'll see what happens. It was a Clemson team that did almost lose to South Carolina, so should be an interesting game. All right, so move on to number 6, Ohio State, and that lost to Michigan State against killing them, so very impressive win against Michigan, one that I didn't see coming. I thought it would have been like a 31-28 game, but not a 42-13 game. It all finally clicked for Ohio State, and the fact that they're previous national champions, I don't know if either Clemson or Alabama loses or both lose, which is hard to say. Ohio State, their playoff chances are extremely slim right now just because they're not going to be in a conference championship, but they still do have a slight chance. If not, then they should be playing a solid New Year's Six bowl, so see what happens. All right, let's move on to number 5, Iowa. You could slide Iowa and Michigan State. You can flip-flop them however you want. It all comes down to whoever wins the conference championship. I thought I was like a lot of other people and thought if they played Ohio State in the conference championship, they would get whooped. But, it might be a Michigan State team without Connor Cook. Not 100% sure on that yet, but that is also a Michigan State team that just destroyed a good Penn State team, I believe 55-16. So, it's hard to say what's going to happen. Connor Cook did play last week, had a very solid game. This is an Iowa team with a solid defense, and if he gets hit, then, you really don't know what's going to happen. So, should be a very entertaining game. I think could be, along with the ACC championship, one of the most entertaining conference championship games. All right, so Michigan State, obviously same deal. I have a number 4. Just a playing game. Whoever wins that is into the college football playoff. Whoever loses is probably in the New Year's Six bowl. All right, so move on to number 3, Oklahoma. Playing really as well as any team in the country right now. Just destroyed Oklahoma State last night. Sad game for me, but you got to give credit where it's due. Oklahoma's playing really well right now. They beat Baylor, gave Baylor their worst loss of the year. Obviously TCU was close. They did lose to Texas, but if you just want to go by eye test, then they might be the best team in the country right now. See what happens with them in the playoff. I think they pretty much locked up a playoff spot. I think they've locked up as much as one can be locked up right now since they don't have to play again. I don't see how they won't make the playoff now. Really the only situation you could ever see happening, and even it's impossible to almost see this happening, is Ohio State getting in over Oklahoma. If the committee sees something that we don't, but even so, Oklahoma won the Big 12. They've looked extremely good ever since that Texas loss. Like I said, like one of the best teams in the country. The backfield combination of Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon looks unbelievable. Baker Mayfield's playing like a Heisman contender, if not one of the leaders for the Heisman. And, Lincoln Riley has that offense figured out. The defense has been playing pretty solid as well. So, see how everything clicks in the playoff for them. All right, so move on to number 2, Alabama. And, a little bit close for a little bit of the Iron Bowl, but put away Auburn enough to, I guess not be sweating it at the end of the game. I believe they won 29-13. And, looks like it'll be a pretty easy conference championship against Florida. Florida hasn't been playing very well, so, really as long as Alabama doesn't look past that game, they're 17-point favorites, so obviously it's not as it's not as, I guess, I don't know, weird to come up with something to say for it, but it just looks like it could be a conference championship that's a complete rout, where a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, it looked like it could be a pretty even game after Ole Miss beat Alabama and Florida had beaten Ole Miss right after that. So, see what happens. And, yeah, like I said, I think Alabama's in the playoff. Pretty good chances right now. All right, so move on to number 1. Obviously, Clemson. Had a close game with South Carolina, but the game was at Williams-Brice Stadium against a pretty inspired South Carolina team. They did win. Deshaun Watson looked good. I'd say right now him and Derrick Henry are the favorites for Heisman, if not him as the sole favorite. So, yeah, they got a huge game against North Carolina. Obviously not going to be a cupcake game. It looked like for the majority of the season that Clemson was going to get a team like Duke or Pitt and be able to win the ACC pretty easily and just kind of walk into the playoff. But I don't think it's going to be that way. This is a North Carolina team that's probably going to be coming in ranked anywhere from 6 to 9 in the playoff rankings this week, and really that's where they should be. They've been playing really well ever since that South Carolina loss. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, Big Ten and ACC championship games should be extremely entertaining. And yeah, so I believe I've only got 2 sets of top 25 rankings left for the year. It's weird that the season's gone by so fast, but you know what? It's been an entertaining college football season. I really feel like I've gotten the most out of it that I can. So yeah, I'll come back with my predictions a little bit later this week. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah.